Welcome to What's in Your Paper. This video addresses issues concerning 15111 lecture notes. Explicitly what's in the paper lecture notes, and why aren't they just the core material? Well, there's a number of reasons for that. First issue is, what are they composed? So let's go and have a look at the actual lecture notes. So first, the first page is made up of 2 pages. It has a QR code which links to the actual video for the lecture. It also has a link to the video for the lecture as well. So let's see if this actually works then. It links to the Camtasia video. Camtasia videos are an international norm for internationally professional videos. They are not. And as you can see, it links directly to the video. This is a Camtasia video, not a podcast. So that's on the first page. You'll see some other URLs which are important basically to think about issues for referencing these diagrams, which of course you should all do in all your presentations, and remember to put them on the bottom of the page and at the end. So what's on the second page? Well, here are more hints. There's another version of the video there, I'm not going to jump to it, and hints of where you can find the video in the particular area on Blackboard and what it might look like. So again, but why isn't this core lecture material? It is. It's showing you one, this is lecture 13. This is explicitly the topic we're going to cover. This is where you can find auxiliary material and videos for it. The next thing we move into is Q1s. Now, for each lecture, I normally start with a Q1. Slightly before this lecture series, I used to have Q3s. Now you'll see those in the videos. After this, I hint about any metadata relating to the course or this lecture. One of them is the textbook that you can see here, which is in the first lecture, and it is metadata. Then I introduce some keywords I'm going to talk about with this lecture, and here they are for this lecture. It's interrupts, polling, and peripherals, and of course this is all copyright to myself, Richard Neville, only. Then I introduce, and all lecturers should do this for every lecture, the learning outcomes for this particular lecture and what you should learn from this lecture. It is aligned to Bloom's taxonomy. It has a number of components, be they keywords related to the issues you're going to learn, procedures, protocols, and theory, and how you might learn them and explain them once you have. And these types of keywords are delineated here and explained here. Now we actually start the lecture. As you can see, it's actually signposted here. This is the start of the core lecture material. I'm going to say that again. This signpost here tells you this is the start of the core lecture material, which is needed in your exam, and you should revise this. So I'll go through the material, and you can see each page relates to specific information. Again, if there's any metadata, and if I do any presentations, which you can see here, I will give you that data in the notes. Some people have complained, this makes the notes messy. Well, importantly, if you look at what's happening here, this metadata is explicitly explaining this code, and it needs to be done effectively and expertly. So it's done in a number of videos, and in the first week we actually do give a demonstration of this. So I think it's important, even though you may say this messes up our lecture notes, it's there as metadata to help you understand without these videos and metadata, it might not be as easy to comprehend concepts. So then you'll see straight away I give you both the introduction through the blocks and any example Komodo code and where to find it, and it's obviously on Blackboard. And then we go back to the lecture notes and we do as normal a half-time quiz. So we break the lecture into 2 parts and we have a break in the middle, and then you can write down the answers here yourselves and we will ask these questions. Then obviously we're straight back to the lecture material, and this is the core lecture material, and more lecture material here as well. So we'll scan through until we get to the end. In a minute you'll see that this is now the middle. We'll scan through again, and in a moment when our computer catches up, because this has to raster scan this information into the Adobe viewer, and sometimes it takes a while, and as you can see a little back-end disk which isn't an SSD is taking a little bit of time. So while that's happening, I'll just say that remember these notes are in black and white. They are the notes that you should use for revise, and with that you should realize that there is a set of lectures videos directly aligned to these lecture notes, and they go through in the lecture videos the core material. Now when you get to the end you will see that you've finished the core lecture material, and we're just waiting for my hard drive again. There'll also be metadata, so let's go up. It's doing a raster scan of the imaging, so if it hasn't moved it into RAM it takes a while, and this computer I'm running this on does not have many areas of RAM to store this because it's quite a small memory. So let's scroll up. As you can see, it's taking a while. And remember this with your computer, that actually the mechanism to produce this data is actually quite complex, and it does produce quite detailed code, as in the code it stores as well. So let's just go through this. So we've got back to the middle, and in a minute we should have a little placeholder that should tell you we've stopped once it's gone through. And again, it's raster scanning, so it'll take a while to build it. And there we are. So it's stopped the key lecture, and the last lecture slide, as you saw in your lecture notes, and again is this one. And the reason it takes so long to raster scan is because the PowerPoint detail on the PowerPoint slide is quite detailed for graphics and text. So this is actually your last lecture note slide. The other two here are pointing at demonstrations of that code. So this one here is pointing at video, and this one is highlighting where you can find it. This one is moving on to a program in Komodo that demonstrates it. So this one here demonstrates. Now we've ended the core lecture material, we're into a summary, we're into a retrospective, and we're looking at mind maps that link and point and associate the information we've talked about today in the lecture. And you'll see when the lecture finishes is explicitly when the summaries finish. Now there is extra advice on these videos, so it can show you where to go to get extra information. Then it looks at the learning outcomes and self-study if there is any, and there it hints about certain information. And here you can look at meta information relating to data that will also align to the lecture notes but will support them. They are not data in the core lecture maybe, but they're data that you should understand. The core lecture we see in the real-time video on Blackboard, and you will see all the material that's included. The extra data is included for your reference material only, and if you are in a view of trying to get a first, you might realize that this is metadata that will help you. The metadata itself is a lot of different data that is needed to give you extra views, extra ideas, extra information of covering auxiliary information that hopefully will help you. So it shows you information about where you can get lab exercise information for the next week, which will probably be covered in the course, and it shows you where you can get the hints as well. It also starts pointing out what the hints look like. Gives you best advice as well on where to go when, remember, some of the lab exercises in the labs are quite complex, and it shows you when a lot of videos have been produced to help you through your learning curve of understanding what a stack is in this case. Then it talks about self-study notes if there's any extra notes you need to look at. Then it moves on to metadata again to explain any auxiliary points that again will help you learn and explain some of the keyword terms and instructions and how they work explicitly. Then it moves on to self-directed learning. Now this is the whole point of a university, and I'll let you read this yourselves, but actually it moves on to a set of key self-directed learning tasks that you should undertake if you're thinking about obtaining a first or going for a higher level degree. You need to think about understanding what self-directed learning is and what it relates to for your responsibility for your own learning. We then move on to the older videos that you can still see on my YouTube channel. I suggest you don't watch these. If you go to Blackboard, you'll see the faster ones. They're on the CS server and they tend to be faster. Some people like the YouTube videos because they like the YouTube video viewer, others don't. Now we move on to lists of questions. Now these are questions you can ask me in class. Then we go on to what we're going to see next week or in the next lecture, and here's the Q3s. Now remember, these Q3s are self-reflective and self-directive learning techniques to get you to self-assess. Each lecture has these. Now there are means to get you ready for revision as well. And you'll see next week's as well. So you can actually, before you get in next week's lecture, work out what Q1 is. This is Q1 for next week. And there's metadata to again point you at the book and the library catalogue, and more information about background reading and different pages you can read, and more background reading URLs as well. These are very important for lecture material, which is heavily signposted between outcomes and the summary sheets is what you need. It's your choice, but it might not be if you want to first. There's a lot of extra meta material around. Then there's a glossary. Now if you're not sure what a glossary is, please read this text. And here are the glossary terms for this lecture, and they're at the end of each lecture. Again, here's some more learning resources. Now if you say again, but I just want in my lecture notes the core lecture, well then obviously you haven't realized that the core lecture needs to be supported. If you're going for a first, you need to realize there's auxiliary data that will help you understand the core theory, the core concepts, the core facts in the core lecture material. I cannot do this, and no lecturer can do this in any 1 hour lecture. It's physically impossible. What you must realize is there's a lot of material out there which will support you. And here it is. So please realize the lectures do not stand on their own. The lectures are supported by Blackboard and a lot of metadata. We've explained the core lecture material. And you've seen that it takes a lot of information to explain this. And that's why your lecture material is not just the core notes. At the end here you've just seen there's another set of questions. These questions are important if you want to first. They're there to evaluate your knowledge. They are there to evaluate your understanding. They're there to help you. They are not there for anything more an understanding of more data related to the core lecture that cannot be covered in an hour lecture. It's impossible. Remember, the answers to these are all on Blackboard. So these are set up to say, well, some of these, and they are, might be questions for exam or. And that's the majority of the material. At the end of a number of these lectures, I also place upcoming sheets and lab sheets. Remember, they are just pointers. Do not read them in the lab or the exercise class. You can download the exercise sheets in the exercise classes from the first website, which is given to you by the first lecturer in this course, and the labs are given to you in Freshers Week in a lab book. So again, these pointers at the end, the labs exercise sheets, are pointers. The real detailed high resolution versions, well, one for the labs you're given a Freshers Week, two go to the first lecturer's CF web page PDF form as well. Thank you for listening. This one, as we've seen, to what the lectures contain. The lectures contain not just the core material. They're composed, we saw in the module guide, of a number of issues. So we saw that the lectures were first the Q1 at the start of the lecture, and previous to that we might introduce some other issues for the lab or the exercise class this week. Then we have an overview of the lecture, which is really the learning outcomes. Then we have the core material, which is sandwiched between the summary points, which are mind maps, and any other metadata that we might be giving out about examples. Then we have a number of other points that are covered. We have short questions to help you revise and check if you understand the lecture. We then have background reading list and a glossary. We also have further summaries and long questions and short questions at the end of each set of notes. So again, here is the core lecture material. It is explicitly signposted between the learning outcomes and the summary slides, which are normally mind maps. So thank you for listening, and we've talked about what is in the paper lectures. Hopefully this has now explicitly explained what is in those lectures.